Welcome to Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. It is Monday, the 8th of May, and our new Windows got installed. I'm very happy. It only took them 1 day as opposed to the anticipated 2 days. Didn't even take them a full day at that, and they're amazing. What's not amazing is having to buy all new window coverings because I refused to put up the nasty blinds that were here when we moved in. But that's okay. So let's talk about what I read last week. It was a very up and down week for me, with unfortunately far more valleys than peaks. So first, let's talk about the DNFs. They're in my handy dandy reading journal. And I will first talk about the DNFs that were from NetGalley. The first one is excuse the bird, he's in a mood this morning. The Fairy Bargains of Prospect Hill by Rowena Miller. As you know, this was on my NetGalley Catch-Up Challenge. It was one I was excited for when I first requested it. Unfortunately, by the conclusion of the first chapter, I didn't care about a single character. I wasn't really sure what was going on. I wasn't sure what the time frame was. I didn't really care. I DNF'd it. Just Pickles the bird. There are too many things to read to continue down that path. And the next one was... I had to go pick up Pickles the bird. Turn around. Come here. Say hi to the nice people. He's a Saphir macaw. He's the largest of the mini macaws. And apparently today he's very much throwing 2-year-old tantrums. Huh. Yeah, come here. Okay, thank you. So the next one I DNF'd was The Will of the Many by James Islington. This was a request to read from the publisher. I read the first chapter. It was very, very dark and very, very grim. And it is very much not what I'm in the mood for. It is... the first chapter was just about torture and secrets, and nothing was very well explained, and no. Then was 2 books by the same author. First and second in a series. The first was A Date to Die For, and the second was A Contest to Kill For, both by Evie Hunter. These were cozy mysteries. They weren't horrible. I just didn't care, and they were very predictable, for lack of a better phrase. They were just very, very predictable. And I was definitely not in the mood for predictable. What are you doing? Come here. No. So my last DNF of the week was unfortunate. This is one I had been looking forward to for a very long time, and this is on my Southern Charms readathon, and that is The Sun by Philip Meyer. I read 50 plus pages of this book. I'm very glad I only paid $1 for it. There are probably 4 POVs in this book. 4, not 3, 4. There's at least... Wait. No. There were 3 or 4 POVs. There were 3 or 4 timelines. It was confusing and poorly written and boring as all get out. And just, I could not connect with any of those characters. I couldn't connect with the side character. I couldn't figure out what was going on. What was going on when. I'm sad, but that's okay. I spent $1 on the book. It will go back to the library, and someone else can read it, and I am okay with that. So, moving on. What did I read this week? first, let's do my library book. That was The Key to Deceit by Ashley Weaver. It is the second installment in the Electra McDonald series. I enjoyed the first one. I have the NetGalley arc for the third one. I got approved for that last week. This was very much a sophomore book, which is funny because this isn't her second novel ever. She has another series, the Verity Braid series, which is at least 4+ novels at this point. So this is not her second book writing. However, this book, it felt rushed. It felt very much like she didn't know exactly what she wanted to do and just kind of made it up as she went. And the result was it was very short. It was like 257 pages. And it was, I don't want to say it was boring because it wasn't exactly boring, but it wasn't exactly an interesting cozy either. I mean, I finished it. I didn't hate it. I'll read the third one from NetGalley happily, but it was very definitely a 2.5-star read. And the Blitz starts in this book in London, and there was not nearly enough written about it. It was just a cover for activities that take place in the book. It wasn't. It was unsatisfying. That's the best word for it. It was unsatisfying. So my next two that I finished this week are both NetGalley arcs. They were on my Kindle. The first one was Identity by Nora Roberts. This had the potential to be a 4-star read. However, I took 2 stars away because first, let's talk about the premise. Morgan Albright is the protagonist. She is working 2 jobs in Baltimore. She owns her own house. It's a fixer-upper. She's got a roommate. Her life is good. It's going down the path she had planned. Her second job is as a bartender. She meets some guy who says he's there on business for a while, and they strike up a conversation. Several chapters later, Morgan comes home to find her roommate murdered, her house burgled, and oh yeah, by the way, her identity stolen and all of her cash and savings. She eventually goes home to Vermont to live with her mother and grandmother, gets a new job, starts to rebuild her life, and is still being tracked by the guy who killed her roommate, who is in fact a serial killer who's done this many times before. So, I can forgive the swearing in this book. It happens in the beginning, or when the serial killer is after Morgan later in the book, because it's appropriate emotion-wise for what's going on in the prose. I can forgive that. That's fine. Not my first choice. I always think there's a better way to express it. But at the same point, in her shoes, I probably would have said the same thing. Okay. So, if it was just that, and the way the story was written, with the exception of what I'll talk about here in a second, it would have been a 4-star book. However, here's where I downgraded 2 stars. Morgan meets a guy at her new job. He's perfectly respectable. Everybody in town knows him. Guy. There's nothing wrong with him. Problem is that Morgan, who is emotionally damaged, traumatized from everything that happened in Baltimore, trying to rebuild her life, turns around and sleeps with him. And while most of that sex happens off the page, enough of it happens on the page that it's just there to sell the book. It is 100% gratuitous, and it becomes the basis for the romance in the book. I'm sorry, but you cannot build... They end up getting, the romance continues. And I'm sorry, but sex is not a basis for a long-term relationship in which, one sees a forever future. Neither is shared trauma or, rebounding after, trauma like Morgan went through. Just, the sex was gratuitous. The story would have been just fine without it. And the romance was skin deep. It was not... I didn't believe they were in love. So I gave it 2 stars. Don't feel bad about it. Absolutely don't feel bad about it. Now, for the best book I read this week, that is without a doubt Esme Cahill's Fails Spectacularly by Marie Bostwick. This is my second Marie Bostwick book. The first one I reviewed on my blog, which is, like always, linked down below. I read it in October of 2022, and that was The Restoration of Cecilia Fairchild. Esme was an arc from NetGalley. It tells the story of Esme Cahill, who grows up in North Carolina and escapes when she graduates from college at 19 to go to New York and start her life. She wants to be an author. She has an entire spreadsheet of how her life is supposed to progress. At what age she needs to accomplish such and such. Authoring doesn't work out for her, so she becomes an editor in a publishing house. She does well as the editor of a publishing house. She gets married when she's supposed to, according to her spreadsheet. And then she gets divorced because it turns out her husband is gay. And that's pretty much all you need to know about that. It happens fairly early in the book. It's not a spoiler by any sense. And then she gets laid off from her job. So she goes home to North Carolina. Her grandmother has died, left her a mysterious box. The mom she does not get along with is there, and her grandfather is there. So she decides to lick her wound, help her grandfather, restore the family business and lodge. And that's the setup for the story. This is a beautifully written book. It is not a romance. It is not a filled with action. It isn't a faith-based book, even though there is some, in Tammy vernacular, gentle everyday faith. This is not a love story. This is, and the author coined this phrase in the book, quiet fiction. And I think that is a beautiful description of not only what this book is and what the story Esme authors in the book about her grandmother is, but I also think it perfectly describes a subgenre of fiction that really we try to pigeonhole into other spots, and it doesn't really work. The Restoration of Cecilia Fairchild is another perfect example of quiet fiction. These are beautifully written books, but there is not a lot of action. There is not a lot of drama and suspense and angst. There is just the simple everyday life of the characters and the story and how Esme and her mother and everything they're going through and how they're resolving stuff comes together to form a life and to restart a life and rebuild a life. It's every day. Every day isn't filled with action and quests and drama. It is filled with quiet moments and reflection and family interaction and, doing the dishes. And this book is a beautiful, beautiful book. Everyone should read it. It is 100% clean. There is no romance. There is no swearing. There is nothing objectionable in this book. It is a beautifully written story. Just like The Restoration of Cecilia Fairchild was a beautifully written story. I love that one too. Esme Cahill failed spectacularly was a 5-star read for me. Marie Bostwick is an auto read for me. I need to read the rest of her back catalog. I loved this book. Kahlua. Puppies are playing. And Esme Cahill was so good. It kind of spoiled me for everything else I tried to pick up and read this week. Hopefully, I'm out of that phase. So we'll see what I'm going to read this week. See if I get out of the funk. I have so many books I need to read right now. So what am I going to read? Well, I'm still working through my NetGalley backlog, so I'm working on that. So obviously on my Kindle. I know I'm going to read. Oh, can I reach it? There we go. The Hound of the Basket Stitch. This is an Anne Cahill book, or Anne Canado book. I'm sorry. It will get me out of a reading slump if I'm in one. I'm probably going to read a Anne Cleeves novel this week, and I'm probably going to finish The Sorcerer by James L. Huggins. I left it downstairs. I'll insert a picture. I started it last week. I'm 50-odd pages in. It's okay so far. It's not blowing my socks off, but I'm not wanting to DNF it either, so that's good. What are you reading this week? What did you read last week? Please comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.